always delighted to be with you on the airways of Second Advent Radio, and those of you who are listening on our various social media platforms. We welcome you just the same. We trust that you are doing well. More so, we pray that your marriage is enjoying good health. We are here. Our program is Marriage Encounter. We are here to share information, to provide insights as to how you can make your marriage more meaningful, how you can utilize resources in aiding the proper maintenance of your relationship. With me, Dr. Greene, is Pastor Staton Adams. Good day, Pastor Adams.
Good day, Dr. Greene, and good day to all of our listening and viewing audience. It is sure a delight for us to be with you again this morning. It is always something that we look forward to because we have, even though brief, we are able to share and to interact and to give you valuable tips and information about how you can improve your marriage, your family, and that is what we want. So that we normally say, call somebody and let them know that Marriage Encounter is on, and they can be tuned in just as well, and they themselves can receive the information firsthand.
Certainly, certainly. Well, we are going to begin with a word of prayer. We invite you wherever you are at this time just to bow your heads as we pray. Eternal Father and our God, be with us as we share with our friends in Radio Lands and those who are listening via the World Wide Web. Grant that the information shared today will prove meaningful. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, today
Amen.
we want to continue our discussion. We have been talking about conflict. It has been a journey, Pastor Adams. You know, this matter of conflict is ever present, and it is important that marriage get the necessary skills to deal with the various challenges and issues that come out of conflict situations. We want to talk about a special kind of conflict today. And I think today's presentation is rather very interesting. Again, we're going to take our time with it, but we want to look at known versus unknown problems. Now, every marriage, as someone says, every marriage has at least a sprinkling of some problems. How we deal with the problems
Yes.
makes a big difference. Isn't that so, Pastor?
Yes. Once we are alive, then there is no way we can get around it. That's normal. That's normal. Yeah, once we are alive, there's no way we can get around it. If we are alive, conflicts are a natural part of being alive. And that's why we said, and I like what you said, we're going to take our time with this, because if conflict is a normal part of life, it means that there's no way getting around, there's no escaping it. But how we approach conflict is what really matters. How we approach the conflict is what really, really matters. And so so we are talking this morning about the known versus the unknown. And, there are several things can happen. There are several postures we can take. And denial is a major issue. Matter of fact, people can deny, people can sweep it under the rug and live a life of pretense, or they face the conflict head on and seek to solve it. So what is dangerous about denial? Denial is that, the problem is there, and it is there enough, it is affecting the relationship, it is affecting us, and in fact, it might even be destroying the relationship. But we are in denial, as though this is not really happening, it is not really happening, and we pretend, we put on a facade, but we are being affected. We are being affected personally, and then we are being affected as a couple, and we are still in the state of denial. It's like when somebody's on substance and all of the evidence are clear, your life becomes dysfunctional, you begin to operate differently, you begin to miss work, you begin to take things that don't belong to you to feed the habit, but yet you're in denial that everything is fine, nothing is wrong with you, and you are very vehement about the denial to say that nothing is actually wrong with you. These people, something is wrong with them and not me. That's a terrible state to be in, to actually know that things are not fine, the relationship, the intimacy is eroding, the relationship is becoming dysfunctional, the marriage is drifting apart, and all of these are happening because there is something there, and either you or both of us are in denial about it. That's a very dangerous place to be in.
Well, it is. The reality is that sometimes people who are denying are not really aware of the problem. There may be individuals who are aware that there's a problem and they're denying it as an excuse, as a way out. But we do have real situations, Pastor, where there are individuals who are not so aware that there's a particular issue. Sometimes it may take my spouse to point out that something is wrong with me. It may take my spouse to point out that I do
Yes.
have an issue. And in this regard, sometimes our spouse know things about us that we don't know about ourselves. Some people may want to debate that, but that is where the partnership factor comes in. So your spouse may observe you doing something that has the potential to lead into a negative path, or may recognize that you had a struggle with this in the past and I'm seeing it again, and your spouse points out. And I'm going to use an example. It's not necessarily an issue relating to marriage per se, but I remember a lady saying to her husband, you need to go to the doctor because I'm observing certain behavior characteristics that is suggesting to me that you have a particular health problem. And he denied it. He was in denial. He's saying, I'm fine, I'm feeling okay, I'm so on. But she observed his movement. She noticed that he was getting up a few times at night. She noticed that sometimes he was walking and not in a straight line. And she began to voice that, listen, I think you need to go to the doctor and get checked out. And he was convincing himself that he was fine, but in reality, he was not fine. And eventually he died because he did not respond to wife's urging. So sometimes you are not denying because you be unaware, and at the same time you don't listen to your spouse who is telling you that there is an issue. We do need to listen to our spouses.
Yes, and that's so crucial because your team, and the person who knows you best is the person who is in that space with you. Yeah. I believe that my wife knows me inside out, and she could point out something. I noted that this and this is happening. This is not your usual self. You have departed from so and so and so, because the person knows you very well. But why I'm going to tell you why that is happening, because you see, when we deal with ourself, this is the psychology of self now. There's an obvious self that everybody sees, knows. There's no pretense about it. That's out there. And then there is a hidden self, and then there's a blind self. We call it the Johari window when we deal with communication of personal self-disclosure. So there's this obvious open self that we know, then there's this hidden self, then there's this blind self. And so that and all. So sometimes, yes, it is that what is actually happening. And therefore we are in this denial, you see. And so yes, it is so important that the person who is there, because we might definitely be unaware, yes, and then we might well know that there's something that is wrong, but we are denying, and indeed there may be something that's going wrong with us, and then we are unaware, and it takes the other person to point that out. And that's it. And that is why you are in this intimate relationship. Who else should point it out? The person that is in that intimate relationship with you, that's the best person.
That's right.
That person has your interests. That person has your interests at heart. As we say, that's the person that has your back. as we say, and that is why you are in this intimate alliance, this intimate relationship. So we shouldn't make this a conflict situation to fight over this, because the person has my best interest at heart. That is why they are pointing this out, that I might not even be aware of, and how it is affecting you, and in turn affecting the entire relationship and the dynamics of the relationship. And it is always good to be able to listen and to but it's just like we are accountable to each other. Your husband and your wife, your wife is your accountability partner, and vice versa. We are accountable to each other. In fact, we should make that commitment. If you see something or if you notice something, don't let me get to the point of denial. Point it out to me, and let's be aware, you know. And usually when we're dealing with addiction and clinical things, that's the worst client to deal with, the person who is in denial. When you come in for treatment and you accept that you do have a problem, it makes the work of the clinician easier. But if you're in denial, oh, that's a difficult case to deal with.
Well,
I don't like those.
they do say that when you admit that there's a problem, that's half of the solution. You begin by
Yeah, that's true.
recognizing the issue. But I do want to point out that this is why we are discussing this particular subject today, which is known versus unknown problems. Because sometimes you are aware of the problems and you deny it, and there are times when you do not know that there's a problem. And what we
Right.
want to suggest is that there is a particular approach that you use when the problem is known versus when the problem is unknown. And in a little bit, we're going to get into, and we're going to begin with when the problem is known. We're going to get into that. But we want to emphasize, and critically, we have been saying it already today, that marriage is a partnership. You are going to need your spouse's support in the relationship to deal with the challenges that come out. You are not going it alone. And if there is a problem that you are aware of and you are denying it, that should say something to you. If you have, and Pastor Adams, you spoke earlier about substance abuse. Let's suppose that there's an issue with some kind of addictive behavior. Let's say that he had to go to rehab sometime in the past because of, let's say, alcohol addiction, and you're now beginning to realize that your partner is getting back with the old company. Your partner is showing symptoms of a particular lifestyle that used to be. And you now point out to your partner, hey, listen, I'm concerned about so. Is it that you're getting back into drinking? And your partner is denying this, knowing that there is the issue, then that can be a challenge. And so what we're saying here is that this is a situation where you have a real problem, a known problem, and your spouse is denied. In this case, the denial becomes particularly dangerous, because if you are not willing to admit that you have an issue, it is going to be extremely difficult for you to get help with this particular issue.
Yeah, sure. So it is so important that we understand how valuable the partnership is, and how valuable that other self of us, which is our spouse, the other self of us, which is our spouse. And that is so crucial. And then how do you approach it when you know for sure that there is a conflict with a known problem? This is a known problem now, and like what we said in previous.
Could I suggest that if it's a known problem, you would have worked through it in the past, you know, so you would have laid down some guidelines, some ground rules. You would have said, this is the situation, here's what we're going to do with it. And I'm going to particularly, deliberately, perhaps, Pastor, use another example. Let's say there's a problem of tardiness, right? This is a popular one, and that's why I'm using it. You are consistently late. you're consistently late, whether in going to work, in going to church, in going to whatever function, and your spouse is an individual who is affected by this matter of lack of punctuality. So now you sit down to discuss with your spouse. Listen, I don't like being late. And you solve the problem. You agree that you're going to follow certain guidelines, and you have consequences, because we, as adults, we need to bear in mind that there are consequences to actions. And so you say to your spouse, if you consistently, now if it's a situation where you have a date with your spouse and your spouse is turning up late all the time, and you say to your spouse, if you consistently turn up late, I'm sorry, I'm not going to accompany you on any dates, because I don't like to waste time. Or let's say it's a situation where you are staying up waiting for your spouse to come home to have supper. You may say to your spouse, if this continues, I will do supper by myself and you will just have to prepare your own supper, or to that effect. So if you realize that it's a known problem and you point out the situation, this is reoccurring. We have established before that these are consequences. You have to enforce the rules. And that's one of the things I want to make clear. You have to enforce the rules.
Yes, because and the rule is not a punishment. The rule is to get you to take responsibility. To change the behavior and to correct what is going wrong, so that the conflict or the problem can be resolved. It's not a punishment, because somebody might say, okay, you're punishing me now for no, it's not punishment. You have laid down the ground rules. We are just implementing them, and we are putting them to work so that it will help you to take responsibility and behave responsible, so that we can minimize and get rid of this conflict situation here. And that's fair. That is fair. And once it goes both sides, because if it is you, then it applies. If it is me, then it applies. So it is fair. That's the commitment we have.
I'd just like to add something, and we can talk about it a little bit. Not only is it fair, it's sensible. If and I may want to use another example here. If your spouse has an issue with spending, so every time you agree that this is how the budget is going to go, your spouse goes ahead and spends outside of the budget, you're going to have to take an action if you want to save your economic situation. And you may have to say, hey, listen, this is how we're going to deal with it. Going forward, we're going to need 2 persons to sign a check, or you turn the credit card over to me. I'll be the custodian of the funds, so that we can control measures. And again, I like what you said. It is not punishment. It's a measure that we are using to help us out of a particular situation. And if you deal with the issue and you recognize that, okay, we have things under control, so I'm going to relax the thing and see how responsible you are, and then I observe that you continue in that particular habit or pattern, we're going to have to enforce the rules. That's just sensible.
Yeah, and so it keeps us accountable and responsible, because remember what we said in previous presentation, we are owning the problem, and both of us are in the process of helping to get it resolved. We are owning the problem, and both of us are taking responsibility to get it resolved, and that is so very important, right? And so this is not because as you rightly said earlier, we are in partnership, so we are owning the problem, and we are taking responsibility together. In this instance, I am helping you to deal with the particular thing, but together we are helping ourselves to deal with this situation and to correct what is going wrong in this relationship. And so that is so very crucial. That is so very crucial. I don't want our listeners to miss that point at all, because some people might want to say, well, here again, it is me versus you, or here again, you're gone picking at me or something like that. No. Um, one have to be, and that's maturity. Maturity says that I can behave accountable and take responsibility for my behavior if I have done something that is wrong, or if I'm going above the set principle or the established rule. That's the law of maturity, and that's what you want to call marriage has to grow. And in fact, this is one way of growing the marriage, because conflicts help to grow the marriage. When we can get them resolved, fix it, and move on, we are actually growing the marriage, right? So if people have this issue, they shouldn't see it as something that is belittling or like you against me, picking again. No, it is a growth experience, right? And the law of maturity is working here when we are able to do these things.
Precisely. In fact, I just want to add here that we along the lines of maturity, we have to develop the ability to give priority to the success of the relationship. I think, was it last week or the week before, we were talking about when our own needs conflict with the needs of the relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have to, there is a human tendency for us to want to excuse our actions or inactions, as the case may be. There's this human tendency for us to want to look good. And so when your spouse points out that, hey, here's an infraction, what we tend to do is to make an excuse. And if your spouse says, listen, we're going to enforce the rules here, you begin to push back, or you're fighting against me, or I can't have my freedom. I'm a big man, or I'm a big woman. I want to. No, but you are married, and you have to have the discipline. And this is the point with the maturity. You have to have the discipline to realize that in a relationship called marriage, people have to act responsibly. It is not a child's thing. Children don't get married, or should I say children shouldn't get married. Marriage is for mature individuals, for adults.
Yes.
And so when you take on that responsibility, you have to live up to the expectation. You pledge to your spouse that you are going to be a man, that you're going to be a woman, that you're going to live a life of integrity. And you have to stand up and do that. And if your spouse sees that you are not fulfilling your responsibility, that commitment that you made, that pledge that you made, then your spouse has the right to say, honey, sweetheart, whatever you call yourself, each other, that is, listen, we have an issue here. You are not fulfilling your marital obligations, and this is impacting our survivability as a couple. And so we're going to need to address this. And if this continues, then we're going to have to do so and so. And I think that is wisdom. And so when there is this feeling or tendency to want to excuse your actions and to want to push back and to blame and to try to justify your actions, be careful with that. That is not good for the relationship.
Yes, and it is just a beautiful thing and a noble thing, because marriage is and that's Bible. It's about building each other up. Really, in Ephesians, right? Is really about building each other up, and that is what it is, really. So we should not take it personal. We should not take it personal and create a further conflict, right? We just should see it as a personal responsibility, and that I have to take on, and that will help me as a person to grow, and then by extension, it will help the relationship in a general sense. And that is what it really should be. So yes, whether the conflict is known or unknown, if it is unknown and my spouse has a right to point it out to me, and so fine. If it is known and I am the one who have been at fault and behaving like what we say, something like a recurring decimal, then the rule has to be applied. The rule has to be applied so that I can, as we say in local terms, that I could get a grip of myself. I could get a grip of myself, right? And that's just a lovely thing. And I would want a spouse who is going to be willing to show me that I am, I am not measuring up in this particular area, and how can I help you? How can we grow? How can you grow in this particular area? And is willing to put the because that is why that shows the person loves you as a person, and they have your best interest at heart. They want to see you go to another level, and that's evidence because the person could say, well, who cares? If that's the way the person that the way you want, well, let it deteriorate and let this whole marriage deteriorate. But the person is concerned about you. They have a genuine care and love and affection for you, and they want the marriage. Those are cues, those are signs to show you that this is somebody who wants the marriage to work, he wants it to grow, to continue, or the person will not go to that length. No, definitely not.
Sometimes I think we need to think a little beyond the now. For those individuals who are married for 5, 10, 15, even 20 years, think a little beyond the now. See if you can cast your mind to the time when your children graduate high school. You are what we like to say is the empty nest stage, where you are
Yes.
now on your own. Go to 40 years, go to 50 years, and it's just you and your spouse. What kind of relationship? Now, some of you listening may be there already, but for those who are not there yet, what kind of relationship do you want to have when you get there? The actions that you engage in today could determine the quality of relationship that you have later on. And so when you are justifying your actions, when they are inappropriate and you're seeking to justify them, you're damaging the survivability of the relationship. And if you really love your spouse, and if you really want to have a happy marriage down the line, when we sometimes look at the life cycle of marriages, we see ebbs and flows. But what you really want at the end of the day, when you are, you should start together, husband and wife, without children. And that's where you're going to end, hopefully, unless there's interference by death, so that your children are going to grow up mature and leave home. Yes, there will be your children, but they're going to be on their own and they will have their own lives together. And the two of you are going to be left together. And what you want when you reach 50, 60, 70, 80, to be in each other's company in a real meaningful way, where you have well gelled together, know each other to the point where you're not arguing anymore. That's what you want to accomplish. And if you're not
Yes.
disciplined enough to listen to your spouse when you're younger, you're going to have challenges when you're older.
Yeah, and you will never arrive at what we call a perfect synergy if you continue to deny, if you continue to take all of these avoidance thing, if you don't want to listen, and sometimes it will require confronting the other person or confronting each other. And confronting here is not in any abrasive, unkind, unloving way. It is confronting the behavior so that the problem can be resolved, you see. And so
Our time
confronting,
is up.
our time is out. Oh,
Yes, our time is up.
I'm not even looking at the clock.
Yeah, well, we're gonna pick it up from there next week. We're gonna move on. It gets even more interesting because we're gonna be talking about when the problem is not known. But until then, if you have questions, comments, or concerns, Marriage Encounter at slcadventist.org. That is Marriage Encounter at slcadventist.org. We're sorry we have to end so abruptly today, but we're out of time. That's all the time we have. Until next week, same time. May God
And time is gone.
Be yours. Bye-bye.
Felt like you're impossibly trapped in a meaningless existence and you feel helpless to do anything about it? Today, that's what we're going to look at, and I really think you might want to hear this. That's today's Authentic.